Okay guys, I started it. I issued out a challenge today. The challenge is, let's say you have 6 people to feed, and the only thing you have is butter or oil or lard, which I happen to be out of right now, and flour. I have self-rising flour here, and I have regular flour here, and salt and water. Here's the water. Now, we've got 6 people to feed, and that's all we've got. I did say you can use 1 pan and 1 bowl. Now, the bowl that I chose is a copper bowl, copper chafing dish, but it's a bowl. So we're going to start by making the biscuits first. I want to make biscuits and gravy. I have chosen butter instead of oil because I don't have milk and sugar to add to these biscuits, so I want to give them a little bit of flavor. So the first thing we're going to do is mix up our biscuits. I'm going to mix and bake in the same pan here. I want to use self-rising flour. So we're going to start by adding our flour, and I'm going to use about 2.5, 2.25 cups. It's hard for me to measure. I normally just put my hand in there and grab a bunch out. And then I'm going to add my butter, and I want to use a cup of butter. I've now used 2 sticks, which makes it a cup. And you want to start by getting your butter mixed in there a little bit. The more you handle this, the harder your biscuits are going to be. So touch it with your hands as little as you can. And you just want to mix that butter into the flour until it's a little bit grainy. Grandma used to do this with 2 butter knives. It's getting there. Okay, now we're getting a light crumbly texture there. I'm going to add just enough water to make it hold together. You want to add it a little bit at a time. If you add it all too quickly, you'll just end up with a mush, and it's difficult to fix. And like I said, you want to handle it as little as possible because you want to keep that butter in its solid form. Okay, so we have a little bit of a paste there. And now, my cameraman just reminded me that I forgot to add salt. So that's a good sized pinch there. It's probably not necessary that I added the salt because my butter is salted butter and my self-rising flour has a little bit of salt in it. Okay, we're coming up to a good paste here. All I have to do is work it out of the pan because, like I said, I'm going to use that same pan to bake in. Okay, so I'll take this out, throw a little flour on my table, clean out my pan. Alright, so there's my self-washing pan. I'm now going to take a little bit of butter and butter that up. I'll work these biscuits down just a little bit. Don't want to handle them too much, but what I'm going to do is work them down enough that I can fold them over to give a layer of flakiness. You want to get them down to about a 1/4 inch. Maybe close to 1/2 inch. It's not a science. Okay, I'm going to take this, turn it over. If I had enough butter, I would put a layer of butter in between there. Now I think we said we had 6 people we had to feed. So I'll cut this so that it makes hopefully 2 biscuits apiece. And somebody's going to get a little extra. It's probably for the dogs. Now we have a buttered pan here. Turn your biscuits over. So there, all my biscuits are now in the pan. This pan is going into a 425-degree oven for 20 minutes. Okay, so we're going to start this gravy. And like I said, I'm not using oil, I'm using butter because all I've got is butter, flour, water, and salt for my food. So here's my, or 1 stick, butter. And I'm going to toss that on the burner over here. You just want to melt your butter. This is a lot of butter. Normally for making a cream gravy I would only use like a few tablespoons of oil, and I would only use a little bit of flour, but since this has to be our meal, I'm using a 1/4 cup of butter. I have about 3 cups of water left over from my biscuits, and this is regular flour. It is not self-rising flour, this is what I use most of the time for my cooking anyway. So this measuring spoon I think is about 1/2 cup, 1/4 cup. And you just want to add a little bit at a time. You're going to stir it down. And what you want to do is make what Grandma used to call a roux. Now because I don't have the milk and I don't have a dash of sugar to put in it, I'm going to cook it pretty dark so that it has the appearance of pork gravy or some kind of a meat gravy. I don't want to turn it into a paste, but I want it to be nice and thick. And I'll add probably more salt than I normally would because once again, the salt is what we have available. You want to have some flavor, so yeah, a little more than that. That's about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. At this point, if I was making it with milk, it's at this point that I would put the milk in and start stirring it down. But because we're trying to make this look like a meaty gravy, I'm going to let it brown quite a bit. And for that flour, I measured out 3/4 cup, and I didn't use half of that, so probably a little over 1/4 cup. close to half a cup. Now I'm going to turn the fire up on this just a little bit to get it to start scorching. When you add the water, you have to stir this consistently. If you don't, you'll get lumps in your gravy. And as you add the water, you're going to add more than what it looks like you need, because the flour will begin to thicken up the water. I think I was about 11 years old. My mom and dad were truck drivers, cross-country truck drivers, and my sister, who was 6 years older than me, was basically raising us. There were times when our budget was really, really tight in life. She couldn't afford to send us to school with lunch money, so my brother and I would walk home from school at lunchtime, and she would have water biscuits and water gravy ready for us. Occasionally we would have fried potatoes, and that was quite a treat. So now you can see that my gravy is starting to brown, or is what we call scorching. This just gives the illusion of it having some kind of meat substance or something besides just water. Otherwise it would have no eye appeal to it. So you can see it's getting nice and brown in color. Have to keep stirring it. Now I'm going to crank up the heat just a little more. Give it a minute to get a good rolling boil all the way across the top of it. So now when I start to add the water, I've really got to stir quickly or I'll get lumps in my gravy. Pour a little bit, smooth it out. Smells like popcorn. If you add all that water at once, you're not going to be able to work these lumps out of it. And you don't want to leave it thick. You want to work it down until it's thin, and then you will begin to allow it to simmer. Okay, that was just a little over 3 cups of water. It was just about half a cup of flour and half a cup of, or a quarter cup of butter. So now we're going to turn the fire down on this, let it simmer. It's starting to get dark outside, so we have to go bring the birds, put the birds in and lock them down. So we'll be back in just a few minutes and serve this up. Here's our biscuits. They're still not as golden brown as I think we'd like them. We'll test them and see how they turn out. They're nice and golden on the bottom. That's good. That's not going to hurt a thing when we get the butter on it. They're flaky enough. See the flakes in there? You want to try one, Mr. Cameraman?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good enough?
Good enough.
So, these are coming apart naturally because of the way that I layered them. And we had enough for 6 people to have 2, but I think our cameraman is hungrier than that tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and set him up. Water biscuits and water gravy. That will stick to your ribs, guys. I'm going to feed the cameraman.
Nice.
Thanks, guys.